Hey, are we on?
We are on. We are
Good.
live. At least I think we are. Hope we are.
Okay.
How you
Nice.
doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad at
Good.
all. Not bad at all. Just yeah, looking forward to this actually.
Yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be
Yeah.
good. It's always good.
Well, we try. We
Yeah.
try. We're just on a bit early.
A bit early. Come on, have a little chat. We were sat here in silence basically beforehand, waiting
Yeah.
for the show to start. So
Bored, I think, is the word.
yeah, I think so.
Like,
Just
no.
yeah, it was a bit weird. So we thought we'd just come on and start early. So it's currently just coming up for 7:30. So
yeah, 27.
I guess if people tune in at another time, they might want to skip the next 3 minutes.
yeah, if you're watching this bit
chit-chatting.
on, if you're watching this bit on demand, then feel free to
So
skip
just
over this
skip
because it's
3
not going to be that
minutes to the start of
interesting.
the show.
We just showed something on the screen there, Mike. A few images. Just talk us through what that is and why we sort of slightly oddly decided to put that on the screen a minute ago.
So we're currently writing loads of questions for the site, for the new site, and part of that is trying to make those questions as visual and stimulating as possible. So for every topic, we're creating loads of questions which have a very visual element. Whether that for the psychological, the physiological, there's kind of lots of nice imagery that can go with that for models, diagrams, graphs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we're just making those, and we put them on there because we had an idea that people may want to use those images. So we might, if there was a demand for it, then we would put together some sort of packages where people could purchase the rights to use those images. Saves teachers loads of time, I guess, in searching for the right images. And what we've done is different variations of the same image. So
yeah, I'll put it on. I'll put it on while you're talking, Mike. So feel free. Your sound should carry on fine. So
yeah, fine.
I'll show people a few. I'll put a few up here. So the ones that are going up here are the ones on psychological refractory period as an example.
Okay, so yeah, so lots of different variations of that. So with different labels missing is a typical variation we've done. So you would potentially have access to those images and be able to create worksheets or activities or whatever it is you're going to create using those images. So yeah, it should just help maybe cut out a bit of the searching, trawling the internet for relevant things. It would all be obviously at the right level for the course you're doing. So you would be able to have access to a GCSE pack, for example, and have relevant material for that. And the same for A-level, BTEC, whatever.
And I think it's fair to say we don't know if people want these. We've made them for us. Yeah.
We've only done it for a couple of days, really.
Yeah.
Started doing it for us for the new site, and
yeah, I'm going to show the information processing one. It's kind of cool, I think, for sort of DCR process. I'll put it on the screen, and I guess what we're asking people is whether it's useful.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I mean, whether it's useful for people to have this sort of thing. We're making them. We could make them available. Yeah. I mean, you kind of get the feel for the kind of thing we're doing. We're making tons of these because they're going to feature in our question sets. And we're just kind of posing a question to colleagues, really. Is any of that any use to you for resource building? If it is, if it is, then we'll somehow get it out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think it'd be useful for people.
Yeah, I think so, and they're good quality. That's the thing I'm really happy about is they're really, really good quality. So I'm really confident in that side of it. But anyway, Mike, we're officially half past. I don't know if you wanna give us sort of an official introduction as such.
Welcome to whoever's joined us, and if you're joining us late on demand, then welcome to you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Happy to have you as always. So I'm just kicking off today, just for a bit of variety.
And because you're the most important one here, Mike.
And
really.
I'll tell everyone the real reason why. Got a real nice haircut.
Yeah, that is true.
Well, you did get one the other day from the same bloke. So.
Well, you're young and can claim a really nice haircut. With me, Mike, it's questionable whether it still qualifies as kind of nice haircuts at this age with this level of regression of hair. So yeah, I'm not sure I can claim a nice haircut. Yeah. I certainly enjoyed it. I enjoyed the bit where they set fire to my ears. But anyway,
just in case anyone's wondering, there's a Turkish barber local to the office.
Yeah,
and we've started to frequent.
It's a nice place. So so Mike, tell us a bit about the session and what we're going to do.
So flipped, blended and self-paced learning.
Correct.
For me, this is where it gets really exciting because it's kind of funny that what most people probably see as the service we provide is not directly this, but it's the kind of precursor to this. And obviously, you've been building that for a long time with something in mind, and what that thing in mind was this shift in the culture of classrooms. So the thing that people have been used to using is just part of the story. And for me, this is where it gets really interesting, really exciting. Yeah. And a lot of the work we've been doing with the pioneers, for example, and the conversations they've been having with other people, the quality of the conversation is just so high, so elevated above the other conversations that are happening in education generally.
Well,
It's just exciting.
Yeah, I'm hoping we're going to find that now that we're trying to elevate the conversation. That's certainly one of the things I'd like to contribute. I mean, I'll pick up on something you said there, sort of about me personally. I never had a design, as it were, until more recently, to where this is going to go. It was more of an organic experience. What happened with me was I started to do stuff which worked, and when you start to do stuff that worked, you do it more, and you end up sharing it. So on that basis, it became that became the journey, as it were, rather than having this sort of golden aspiration in the distance. I never really had that, and now I do. But at the time, I didn't really have that as such. But we're gonna. I think it's important to say we're gonna cover at least 3 practices today. Those being flipped, those being blended, and those being self-paced learning. And it's important for us to also say that we know that colleagues are at different points on that journey. And it's important that we all acknowledge that nobody is suggesting that one place is right or wrong.
Yeah, and nobody's an expert just yet. Probably, I'm sure there are somewhere, but nobody is so far advanced in this or so far ahead that they have all the answers. We're just putting this idea out there, and hopefully people are going to take it and run with it and improve the quality of the education that students are going to receive.
Yeah.
So that's the ultimate goal. But we're all kind of learning it together, and that's the idea of the Pioneers Group. Is anybody out there who is trying it or who has made that brave decision, then get in touch, because we want to put those people in touch with each other and provide a platform where anybody interested can go to those people and find out how it's working.
Yeah, I think it's important to stress that we've got a lot of colleagues who will be with us this afternoon who potentially see themselves, or indeed are, pioneers in what they do in the classroom, and we desperately want to work with you. If you're moving in any way towards a flipped, blended, self-paced, hoitagogical, crazy word, learning model, we want to work with you, and we have this Pioneers Group which is set up for that exact purpose. So yeah, I mean, should we look to get on with it?
I think so.
All right, actually, one thing before we do get onto it is that we do want colleagues to interact with the show. So I've just got on the screen there, Mike, how to interact. Just remind colleagues, please.
So Twitter via the hashtag TELCPD, the EverLearner CPD, TELCPD. Phone, there's a phone number on there. I think it's also in the comments, in the notes pack.
In the notes pack, I think.
And also, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, this is a newish channel for the EverLearner as opposed to My PE Exam. So the more subscribers, then that kind of thing helps keep this stuff free.
Yeah.
So please subscribe if you can.
Okay. So all that being said, Mike, let's move it on, shall we? Let's get into the main part of the show. Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, folks. So we should have notes pages ready, and yeah, let's get on with it.
Well, let's kind of get cracking with this, because as I said before, I really want to make sure that we make time for some good question and answer here. Sometimes when we do these sessions, we tend to do the session and leave sort of a very marginal amount of time for question and answer. Let's do that differently today. So, flipped, blended, and self-paced learning models, and obviously this is part of our CPD session, as we know. The first thing I guess I want people to realise is that if you're thinking about this, you're probably at least potentially on some kind of transition journey from traditional to potentially, I'm not saying there's no way of sort of skipping a step here, for example, from traditional to flipped to blended. And what we would argue, kind of the final step, is what we'd call a self-paced learning model, or self-paced classroom. So the basic premise is that potentially, at least, you are making a transition from each of these steps. So on that basis, it makes a lot of sense for us to understand the core structures, assumptions about each of these ideas, and about each of these models. And I guess by far the most likely situation is that a majority of us still have a significant proportion of what we might call traditional structures in our classroom. Now, what's traditional to one person can be very different to somebody else. So let us acknowledge that straight away. Let us also acknowledge that I'm looking at the model as a whole when I describe this. I'm not looking at anyone out there who's taking part in this session and thinking this is how you teach. I realise there would be massive differences between how every individual actually approaches this. What we're looking at is a general picture. So look, what would we tend to find in that general picture in the traditional classroom? Generally speaking, we're going to be taking part in what we'd call one-paced courses, plus differentiation. Okay, so what we find in the traditional model as a structural phenomenon, this is that we have one pace one-paced courses with some individualized differentiation bolted on. So what would that look like? That would mean, for example, that all students would take topic 1 in week 1, and all students would take topic 7 in week 7. All students would take revision the week before the exam together. And what we try to do within that framework is we try to bolt on some differentiation to make it individualized and personalized. And I think it's fair to say that in this model, differentiation is in many ways the premium behavior by the teacher. It's the highest level of skill. I have to say, looking at my own teaching career for 17 years, I always felt that I was not that great at differentiation bluntly. Now I think I understand why, but that's how I felt. Secondly, it's what we'd call a teacher-controlled environment. Now, nobody's saying that this is bad. It's just the nature of how the model works. And what we mean by teacher controlled is not necessarily that the teacher's just at the front lecturing or transmitting information in sort of in some kind of presentation, but it's teacher controlled in the sense that they are the ones that release the information to the students, and the timing of that is dictated by the teacher. So if you take any worksheet you've ever worked on, a worksheet 11.3 that you've worked on course X, Y, or Z, it's probably been the teacher who's decided to give that sheet out. And maybe that incorporates the differentiation as well. We also find that in the traditional model, we have what we'd call tech bolted on. Okay, so tech bolted on. And what we mean by this is if we look at something like technology, the use of devices, for example, it's going to be bolted on to this model. It's not going to change this model per se. It's going to fit into this model. So a classic kind of symptom is that a device will come into play, but the device will be used for typing and storing instead of writing with pencil or pen and storing within a folder, for example. So that's a classic example of this tech bolted on. And we're also sort of saying here that this is broadly what we would call a talent model. And what we mean by that, if we think about what we've said there, we're basically saying that overall the process is done to and by all students are roughly the same, with a little bit of differentiation thrown in the mix. And as a result of that, what comes out of it is a variable achievement rate. And that variable achievement rate, generally speaking, will be based on where the students started. What was their level, what was their performance, what was their skill level when they started these experiences. And that's what we would call a talent model. The output is based on the input, or the output is based on, you take your raw materials, you do a broad process to them, and whatever comes out is broadly built on what the input was, on what the raw material was. So we would refer to that as a talent model, broadly speaking. We're taking people's kind of abilities, and you might even hear that word in school, often used advisedly, and we're building on those abilities, and that another word for that could be kind of a notion of talent. So there's our traditional model. We all have to decide whether we are doing all of our lessons like that, part of our lessons like that, whether macro level considerations are like that, or whether we have decided to do it like that, whether we've specifically chosen to go in like that. Flipped is a kind of a similar but different model. It's not that different, though, to be perfectly honest. So we're still talking here about one-paced. We're still talking about one-paced courses. Okay, so that is exactly the same. So realize if you're flipping to a flip model, the flip model is still one-paced courses. Okay, so that the structural phenomenon within the classroom is the same. Secondly, what we're tending to find is that what we'd call class learning, or traditionally class learning, is done at home. Okay, and I should have actually said over here that what we tend to find on this one is it's class learning plus homework. And again, if you reflect on this, what we're finding is that will be teacher controlled. Okay, so here with the flip model, we're talking about one-paced courses again, but this time the class learning, normally what is things such as taking teaching, for example, doing the first access of a worksheet or a question or a problem set, that learning gets done at home. So let me be clear, we are talking here about the core learning. The core learning is done at home. So I just want to repeat what I said. The teaching, the transmission, the broadcast, the inculcation of knowledge is done at home. And then the idea of that, and I'm going to put this in inverted commas, is that then you do the really difficult stuff in class, is that you get stuck in class. Okay, so I want you to think about that for a second. Often what we do in this traditional model here is we'd do the core materials in class, and then at home we'd go and do kind of maybe the more challenging applied stuff, such as problem sets, past paper questions, whatever. Here, what we're saying is that we take the core stuff at home, but we take the really difficult stuff where the students are much more likely to get stuck, and we do that in the class. And of course, that means there's more support available at the right time. Okay, so I'm going to say more support here. Okay, and I want to address something else. If this core learning is done by video tutorial or some kind of notion of video, I don't know why I did that, some kind of notion of the teaching being available via video tutorial, and if you've worked with us, you know how we do that, then of course what that means is you've got more support in the classroom, not just because you're doing the difficult stuff with people around you, but because the teacher has their time freed up to actually give that support, and that is a very valuable thing. Now, we're saying with the flip model, this is still talent model. Okay, so we've still got some sort of notion of a talent model here. Okay, so the idea is that we're still taking, the outputs are still going to be based on the raw material inputs, you know, what many people would describe as ability. It's still that industrial processing. But what we're finding as well here is that the tech is used at home. So tech at, let me just bring this down 1 second, the tech at home. Okay, so something like the technology now has been used for a specific purpose, this time to take the core learning in, say, video tutorial, online quizzes, this kind of thing, but it's being done at home. So that is another alternative for you, taking the core teaching, making it homework, using the more challenging things, using it as class learning. Okay, let's have a look at blended learning. Blended learning, blended learning, and I'll come back to this in a second, is what we call C plus M plus E. Now you probably think, what the hell does that mean? Okay, but it actually means class plus mobile plus E, as in e-learning, electronic. Those might to be plus signs. I'm not totally sure what's happened there. And what we're finding here is that we're making a blend, we're making a collision, we're smashing things together. And what the idea, I guess the core idea of it, is that you're taking the best of the internet, not because we've done a search the night before a lesson, but because we've strategically thought about how the internet can impact with our classrooms. We've got the best of the internet plus the best of the classroom. Now, I guess everyone's best of the classroom is going to be different to one another, right? It could well be that the best of the classroom for me is very different to you, for example. Okay, we may value different things within our classroom environments, but the core idea here is we're smashing the internet and the classroom together, and we're taking the best model which comes out of that. And if we take a core aspect of the classroom, such as the teacher transmitting information to students and all teachers doing it slightly differently at slightly different levels, one of the great things that the internet can potentially do is get a great teacher, a great transmitter, a great broadcaster to every single student. And that is a very, very powerful thing, as an example, not the only one, of course. In this blended learning model, it's what we call sometimes self-paced. Okay, so what that would mean, if we looked at it externally, is it would mean that in any lesson time or in any homework, student A and student B could be on completely different parts of a course, qualification, or learning experience. And that would be because student A has advanced further, or because they need to remediate on something they've been stuck on, for example, and they go backwards. Whereas student B is taking what would be considered the average pace because that's where they happen to be. Okay, so it's a blended learning approach in that sense. And what tends to happen in the blended learner, can't even say it, blended learning model, is the teacher becomes a guide. You know, use whatever word you want for that, coach, facilitate, it's up to you. But they become more of a guide from the students. It's more about them releasing, it's more about them providing really high quality conversations to students and making sure students are on track or ahead of the curve. You know, they're making sure they get the right resources in the right hands at the right time. I guess that would be a good summary of that. And let's finally have a little look at self-paced learning, and I can't remember exactly which color this was, so I might not have got the right one. So for us at least, blended learning is as follows: S, success equals FI, familial involvement, times behaviors, times resources. That all of that, I should have made those brackets bigger, all of that is over what we call mastery deficit. and it's multiplied by what we call valuable time. Now, you're probably looking at that and thinking, what on earth is this lunatic talking about? But effectively, what we're saying in the self-paced classroom is that we can effectively define what success looks like, and if anything's going wrong within the self-paced pedagogical learning model, we can effectively find it in this equation, in this model. So just to be clear, I'm going to go over this in more detail in a moment. Success, familial involvement, learning behaviors, high quality resources are all the things that we want to get as high as possible, and we must make sure that what we call a mastery deficit is as low as possible, you know, the gaps in someone's knowledge, skill and behavior, and we multiply all of that by valuable time, and whatever that comes out at is going to be a very, very probable indication of how a learner is going to experience success. Now, I'm confident there's going to be some questions in the chat about that, so do post them, and we'll try and answer those for you in the chat, because that's going to cause a bit of confusion until I go over it in a bit more detail. But just know that we are absolutely clear on what we consider to be success in that model. Again, what we're saying here is that learning now is what we'd call mastery based. So again, just to clarify this point before we go into more detail on it, mastery based would mean that we reject the ideas that students have, that their target grades, for example, dictate the likely outcome of where they're going to be. In this model, and in this model, for example, target grades do dictate the likely outcome for a student, because effectively we're talking about a one-paced experience. But in this self-paced experience, we can set the challenge at every task to the level of mastery for every student and vary the time students have to access that level of mastery. Now, again, some of you are going to come back to and say, well, if all students are aiming for mastery, how can you be confident they get to the exam? We can answer that for you. Okay, we've got a lot of experience with that. That is a classic question to get. If you've got that in your mind, that would be a pretty good question at this point. Other points here. I mean, it comes with the territory, with the name of it. You know, learners decide the pace that they progress through within a very stringent and rigorous target setting protocol. Students pace their own progress through tasks and experiences. They also decide the order in which they're going to do them. Okay, and that's what we call self-directed learning. And finally, this self-paced learning model is what we call learner-owned. So before we get into kind of the nitty-gritty of each of the models and what they look like, the first thing I'd ask you to do as an individual is just, you know, this is just a rhetorical question. You're very welcome to post a comment about it in the chat if you wish, but, you know, it's just for yourself inside your mind. Where are you with your teaching? You know, I ask myself this question all the time. I often ask myself, because I'm probably majority of the time in here, and I do go to here occasionally, not very often these days, and I kind of never go there, and I literally never go here. Okay, so I literally never go to that traditional model, unless, funnily enough, the only time I do that, and it's something I'd like to eradicate really, is when working with teachers if we go to schools, for example, we do training at schools, we tend to still do that through broadcast, through presentations, through question and answer, those sort of processes, all of us do at the same time. And that's something, again, I think we can broadly challenge, but anyway, that's for another day. So where are you, where am I with the model which we're using? And if you are a course leader, a head of department, a director of sport, you're running a department somewhere, you're a senior leader, you're a head teacher, where is my team? Okay, so where are they with their typical behaviors? And I want to be clear here, no one's saying you should be all here. It's a journey. The question to ask oneself is, are we on that journey, and do we know we're on that journey? And if we're just kind of doing the same things as we've always done, then why are you doing that? What's the educational value system at play to use this model? What are the key indicators that we've used, say this is the best model that we think would be ideal for our students? And if we haven't gone through that process, then at least we should do that as a very minimum. And I can't really answer this for anyone else, but wherever you and your team are, why are you there? Okay, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of that now. Everyone's answer to that will be different, but wherever you are in that model, what has got you to that point, and what are the precursors to have led to that? So let's have a little look at flipped learning for a second. I'm going to assume you know a great deal about traditional classroom models, so I'm not going to go on about that. But let's have a look at flipped learning. I'm just going to go through some key points for us here, which I think will be useful. First of all, in terms of flipped learning, I would describe it as a tool only. I want to be clear here. I don't think flipped learning is a learning model. It's not a learning structure. It's a tool. I would equate it to being as significant and parallel and equivalent to something like a great group work activity or a brilliant questioning technique. That's where I personally think it sits as an experience. Secondly, let's just remind ourselves, we're saying that the core learning is done at home. Okay, are you doing flipped learning now, for example? I mean, you may well be at work, I would imagine, but are you taking your core learning about these topics outside of kind of curriculum time, for example? You know, are you doing it outside of traditional CPD? You're kind of doing that core learning at home. And then presumably, if you're interested in this, you're going to come back to your classroom in the coming weeks and give it a try, you know, and that's doing the more challenging thing kind of in the class, right? So core learning at home. For us, this means a real emphasis on really high quality video tutorial. Okay, really high quality video tutorial. So for us, we've recorded the vast majority of what we would consider to be that content, although there's still quite a lot we need to do. But the other thing, and it's a classic of where teachers will go with their initial thoughts, is that core learning needs to be tracked. I'll come back to what we call mobile learning in a second when we look at blended learning. But we need to know whether those activities have been completed and to what degree and success they've been completed. So if a student's going home to do an online tutorial and a quiz about the core learning on, I don't know, the role of ATP, say, then the teacher needs to know how well that has gone before the next lesson so that they can confidently go to the right activities within that next lesson. Now, we see tracking not as in have they done it or not, although we do need to check that, of course. I mean, that is life. But it's more for intervention, and for me, what I would consider intervention to be, and okay, maybe this is somewhat kind of unrealistic, but it's what I would call world-class conversations. So, you know, you have the data for you to know, right? Student A is at this point and has had these problems with the core resources and the core experience, and now I'm going to intervene in ways X, Y, and Z. Okay, so it leads to world-class conversations, not just did they do it or not. Secondly, we tend to find with this model that what we call the problem set, you know, call it the application, call it the writing, call it the problem set, or the Q&A. Okay, this tends to be, or the writing, this is the stuff that tends to be done in class. Okay, so the more rigorous stuff where students are going to really apply their core knowledge is done in the class, because that's where they can be supported if problems arise or if they get confused. It definitely means that we get less, let's call it presenting. I was going to use the word lecturing. I never know which term to use because they seem to be quite politicized, these terms. So I'll give you what you can choose, whichever. Less presenting, less lecturing, less broadcasting from the front. Okay, from the front. So you can decide whichever one of those your presentations are, your PowerPoints or whatever it is that you do. But we're saying there'll be a lot less of that in this model. Not none of it, because you still might only use this flipped learning model sometimes, but there'll be a lot less of that. And the teacher, in terms of their behavior, is they make a move towards guiding. Okay, so rather than being an instructor, the teacher becomes much more about a guide. Okay, so a move towards guiding from the teacher's behavior. And that kind of summarizes flipped learning, and I think a lot of people who will be on this session will have at least attempted that previously to some level of success or failure. That will have been done as a potential classroom model or as a potential tool that you've used in your classroom. But it's something that I would argue you can grab and go with immediately. You know, in terms of our own work, this is obviously what we can provide very rapidly currently via my PE exam, but very, very, very soon via the EverLearner.com, which I can't emphasize enough is going to really radically change the way a lot of us approach our classroom. So this core learning at home, video tutorials, quizzes, online testing, online note taking. These things are absolutely possible, and that's what we do as a service. So talk to us about that if that's something you'd like to address. I don't want to go into kind of a sales pitch at this point. All right, we're going to move on to blended learning. I'm just going to pause a sec just to sip my drink and have a cough. 10 seconds, please. Okay, thanks for being patient with me. Let's move this on. We're looking at blended learning here, and we've got this kind of crazy image here in terms of blended learning. I've seen a really nice metaphor for blended learning, which is literally kind of, I mean, it's going to be a bad drawing, but it's literally like a, how would you draw it? It's literally like kind of a blender with, you know, with the thing in there, and we've literally blending things up in there, okay? So we've got this kind of nice metaphor of what blended learning is. We're literally blending different things together to get the best kind of rich, soupy outcome possible. And I guess that's a nice metaphor and a way of thinking about this. The first thing I would sort of say to you is just to explain this model here. Please understand what we mean by C. C is what we call class learning. So think about anything which you would traditionally consider to be typical in the classroom, such as being together, being at desks, doing some questions, debating, discussing, practical projects, experiments. All of that is, all of that is thrown into the mix here. Not totally sure what I've done there. That's what happens if you press a button that you'd never pressed before on your little electronic pen. You didn't, you know, that's a little lesson in life. Very valuable, I'm sure. So that's what we mean by class learning. We're blending that together with what we call M learning. This is what we mean by mobile learning. Mobile learning means that the class, and what I'm going to come to at the moment in terms of e-learning, is available everywhere, okay? To some degree, you know, at least the resources of that class, of that e-learning. And finally, what we've got down here is e-learning. Of course, let me choose a different color. What we're talking about here is electronic learning. Electronic learning. So this is availability of core resources which can only be achieved online. A great example would be a video tutorial about the greatest teacher that's ever walked on the earth on the very thing that you're learning. That would be a great electronic resource. I'm sure we're all agreed. Let me be clear. I'm not suggesting I or we are that, but that is theoretically possible. Okay, so electronic resources are a great tool. And what we're saying here is that if we can take the best of those possibilities, and what we find in the blend, in the mix of those possibilities, we might find to be a very magical, it's kind of an odd term to use, I accept, but a very rich kind of experience in there. So a couple of things that we'd expect definitely that would be the case here. I'm going to change colour because this red feels a little bit edgy and dangerous. Resources are constantly available. Okay, so whether it be teaching, whether it be a quiz, whether it be a past paper, whether it be a worksheet, whether it be a practical activity, whether it be an experiment, obviously safety, all things being equal, right? These things are constantly available in the class constantly available to the students all the time. Again, we tend to find in this model that the teacher is far more of a guide, guiding the student to the right resource, the right experience at the right time, but never dictating that. Well, I suppose sometimes they might. We get down to here what we would call LMS necessary. Okay, what we'd call an LMS is a learning management system. I'm going to bring you back to something I said before, which is that tracking aspect from Flip Learning. LMS is more than just having a Moodle page where you've listed your PowerPoints. LMS is more that it's actual learning resources that are available and tracked for the student. Okay, so it's not just here are our teaching resources, I'm putting them in a file list. It's a learning experience for the student, and I cannot wait for you guys to see what we are going to offer you at the EverLearner.com, currently projected to be released on 31st of January 2018, and we're pretty confident in that date. Actually, we might go back a couple of days or even a week, but it's not going to be significantly beyond that, and I can't wait until you see that concept that we're going to provide. Enough of that for now, however. A couple of other things. We tend to find in the blended learning model, we tend to find that tech has a purpose. Okay, tech with a purpose. So if any of us are in a, let's put in inverted commas, an iPad school, and those iPads get used for typing, for example, a great deal of the time, we have to question that. Okay, it's a nice sort of window dressing and marketing technique that we're an iPad school, but what are they used for? I've seen brilliant examples of iPad schools, and I've seen shocking ones, so there's everything in between, I'm sure. But in this classroom, tech has a purpose because we're structurally considering E&M learning, and therefore we're building a model where tech has the positive influence. The way we word that collectively in our business is that technology that humanizes the classroom. It's not technology for technology's sake, but it has a humanizing impact on the learning journey. And finally, this is a really difficult thing just to quantify for you at this point, but you will find that your courses, if you move to this model, will become a skill courses. And what I mean by that is that the resources will be so rich that the content and the knowledge will be developed in that environment naturally. So what the teacher and the course will be about will be using those resources to develop the skills. So a skill could be what we might consider to be a harder skill, such as evaluative skill, or it could be a softer skill, such as self-perception and confidence. Okay, but that will become the focus for the teacher rather than it's my job to inculcate the knowledge. The C, the M, and the E learning will do a lot of that if we've got the structures right. So what the teacher's job is going to be about is more to do with skills development. So we're also arguing here, let me just find a little different color. We're also arguing here that this course, broadly speaking, is still going to be course-paced. Still course-paced, okay, plus differentiation. But now the differentiation is going to be dictated by the student, not the teacher. And it's very possible within this model, if you move to this model within 6 months, you could easily make this model what we call mastery-based, more of which in a few moments' time. Mastery-based, okay, so that every task, the output of every task for every student would be at the level of mastery. Now, I know people are going to ask that. How would one student who experiences so-and-so learning difficulty experience that mastery? Well, we can help you answer that. We don't know the answer for every individual human being, but we broadly know the picture for the vast majority of people. In fact, to such a degree that we've never worked with an individual student who couldn't achieve that. Now, whether you accept that at face value or not is up to you. And we've not worked in the greatest, most privileged schools on earth or anything like that. It's just that if the model is right, it allows that individualization. Anyway, let's move it on to what we call self-paced learning. You can also call this hoitagogical learning if you want to. But let me put this in. This model is based on what we consider to be hoitagogy. So let me be clear, we are arguing that we move outside the realms of pedagogy. So I encourage all of you, next time you hear the word pedagogy coming out of your mouth, or next time you hear someone referring to pedagogy, ask them why, and ask yourself why pedagogy and not hoitagogy. What was the decision for that? And of course, in the most cases, the decision has never been made, like it never was for me, the vast majority of my career. I never questioned that pedagogy was the methodology that should or must be used. This sort of notion of hoitagogy or humanistic self-paced learning is absolutely possible. Okay, let's move on. So we're saying here, let's call it loosely blended learning plus. Blended learning plus. And I must declare an influence. This is what I do and I've done for the last, well, I'm progressing to now for the last 5 years. So I do have a bit of a dog in this fight. You have to excuse me for my subjectivity and partiality in this matter. Secondly, we're talking about self-paced courses. I know this freaks people out a little bit, but we're talking about self-paced courses. I'm going to talk about this in more detail in a second. Self-paced courses. We're talking, let me be clear, we're talking about the possibility of having self-paced qualifications. Self-paced qualifications. Okay, something that I am doing regularly. I'm going to talk to you about some specific details of that in a few moments' time. Self-paced qualifications. We're also saying, get ready for this. Get ready for this. You're gonna get kind of. You're not going to believe me at this point. This process involves no marking. Star. Okay, that needs a little bit of explanation. When we say no marking, what we're saying here is we're saying no marking outside of the classroom. Okay, so what you'll find in this model is that she'll spend a lot more time marking alongside the student, and you will have times where you have a checkpoint or you have a mock exam where, of course, you do marking, but generally speaking, the general rhythm of marking will be reduced to being purely done inside the classroom or very, very close to it. We're also going to argue that other than the initial setup, you're going to have no planning. Okay, so let us pause here and let us just think about what this lunatic James has just suggested for a second. James is suggesting, I am absolutely suggesting that it's extremely possible to develop a classroom learning model where students move self-paced through their course and qualifications. They direct their own experiences through that classroom. That the teacher is not at the front delivering or transmitting information. That it leads to next to no marking and next to no planning. Okay, so just in case you think I am insane, it's possible, but that is what I'm arguing. Okay, so I don't want there to be any confusion about that. Now then, it's based on flexible spaces. Flexible spaces. So classrooms, the kind of the rigid model of the classroom needs to be challenged. And we find in this model that even though it's got tech included, that you get a decrease in what we're going to call screen time. Okay, a decrease in what we call screen time. Even though, as I'm going to show you in a second, we have computers as one or devices 1/4 of the experience. This is going to be a reduction in screen time for students. I mean, I've worked in a number of schools. One of which said that 50% of learning needed to be done on the computer. Okay, so interesting idea, but we're saying here that screen time, even though we've got a technological solution, will reduce. A couple more points before I look at our version of this. We're saying that there will be no homework because there will just be learning. Where that learning gets done in class, free periods, lunchtime, after schools clubs, whatever, at home, that is just determined by the student and their self-paced experiences. So there's no homework per se. It's not like we're separating classwork and homework. And a couple of other things, just so you can kind of realize how far we're going to potentially push this. We're sort of saying here that this allows very easily the merging of classes in it, and it also allows the merging of year groups, and it even in the future allows the merging of schools. Okay, so we're saying that this kind of perimetered cell has no real relevance apart from the fact that we've built it that way already. A lot of teaching classrooms are built as kind of 30 people, one teacher structures, because that's been designed for a transmission of information. It has to be quiet to enable that within that environment. And what we're saying here is that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. Also, if students are self-pacing their way through their own courses and their own qualifications, of course you can have people studying different qualifications and courses at that time. And finally, just so you think this brave, I take my radical perspective a little bit further. We're also arguing that the lead teacher in this environment would experience a significant increase in their pay conditions. The model itself the classroom model is itself significantly cheaper, and we're arguing that theoretically this model can mean that a classroom teacher can earn up to £100,000 per year for this set of behaviours and this skills, for being a classroom teacher, not for being a middle manager, not for being a head teacher, not for any of those things, for being a really, really effective classroom teacher, elevating the role of teaching within our society. So let us show you how we do it in our classroom. So we have 4 zones in our classroom: 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and we do it as follows. So zone 1 is what we call the terminal space, terminals. And students go to terminals, computers, in our case, laptops, Chromebooks, and they go there to take online tutorials from great teachers, and they go there to do online quizzes, and soon they're going to do a couple of additional extended things in that space. But that's all they go there to do. Occasionally some internet research, but they never go there to do something pointless like typing. Not completely pointless. If we're going to use typing in our jobs, we need to develop that skill. But typing should not be the objective. It should be the accidental output. We might do a specific course on it. Over here is what we call the quiet study space. Quiet study. And quiet study is where students go because they're going to take any paper-based resources which are available to the students. Next to that space, we've got shelves and folders there. So every worksheet, past paper question, mark scheme, textbook, piece of literature, every single comprehension exercise is available to the student. They take those experiences at the pace and the rhythm that suits them. The third area of our classroom is over here. This is what we call, currently at least, we call our play space, although we're going to change that name soon. Students go there to do little project-based, practical, experimental. They go there to manipulate ideas with their hands, and the idea is that they go there and develop intuition. And finally, over here in area 4, this is what we call small group teaching. And small group teaching is where we go. Let's say a student is sitting here and they get stuck on tutorial 8. then that student may well come here and work with the teacher specifically, or a student coach on topic 8, because they're stuck on that concept. And one last thing, because I know it's going to be something that's going to be asked of us in the chat, is that here, one of the absolutely critical aspects of this classroom, in fact you can't do it without this, is targets. Okay, targets must be rigorous, ruthlessly set and adhered to. Okay, so there should be minimum standards. Okay, minimum standards. And the way we address this, these minimum standards, is that every student achieves mastery early. So ahead of what would be considered an average course pace, every single student would experience mastery at the task level on every task before what would be considered an average rhythm of a class going through a GCSE or an A level or whatever. They master it and then they move on. Sometimes they move on and come back to it as well, to either remaster it or to fill gaps that they developed in that experience. But those targets have to be set and have to be reviewed. So the teacher in here is probably, at least for me, I split my time into 1/3. So I do 1/3 of my time in the classroom as target review. Okay, so literally sitting down with individuals or small groups of students to review the targets. I do 1/3 of my time doing marking. Okay, so that is marking often alongside the students that's done the writing. And I do 1/3 of my time as one-to-one. And that's my classroom time. I spoke to someone the other day, we've got a broadcaster actually, and she was saying that she spends 70% of her time in target review. I think in her model she was probably combining one-to-one target review into the same batch, as it were. But that's what the teacher behaviour becomes within this classroom. And by the way, marking becomes a very different concept as well. You're not generally sitting down with batches of books. You're generally sitting down with the student going over a piece of work that they've done together. So look, that is a very controversial series of ideas that I've said, not least because I've suggested that could become the norm in what we call the master teacher. Let me tell you, the master teacher is not the online teacher. The master teacher is the teacher that masters this classroom model. And this classroom model is about £35,000 cheaper per year than the current classroom models in the average school. So that's where that money potentially is coming from. And I repeat again, look, this is a single classroom, but there's no reason why this classroom couldn't have this wall completely destroyed and the classroom next to it make a larger space for more students and more teachers. Okay, that's absolutely possible when you've got this learning model applied. Okay, final things. Conclusions. A lot of that's very controversial and I went a lot longer than I meant to. This is based on personal choice. No one's saying you have to do this. You might completely disagree with me, okay? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. All I'm here to do is provoke and to share my experiences, I guess. Is it inevitable? A lot of people say no to that question, okay? We say no. It's not inevitable that this transition is going to happen, but we do argue that it's necessary. Okay, so we see it quite differently. We actually argue that we should be making it happen, not just sort of watching as it happens. It's not an inevitability. We have to address the notion of the teacher role. I mean, that is significantly different. So we've got, without question, what we call skill changes. I think everybody can see that. We've got to prepare for that. If this is the world we're moving towards, we have to prepare teachers for that. And obviously we're trying to contribute by doing sessions like this ourselves. So that preparation is important. And finally, I want to sort of say that, okay, I guess in some ways we're advocating to an extent here, but we have to develop a collaboration and a discussion. And on this basis, I just want people to know, and we've got a number of these colleagues in the room or in the session this afternoon, but we've got our pioneers group, which are really, this model that I've advocated here. We have a group of pioneers who all across the UK and international actually modelling this out in classrooms and getting unbelievable success and results. And we're about to publish a large number of results as well based on those principles. So I encourage you to have a think about it. When I come back onto the screen, I just realised I'd forgotten something. When we come back onto the screen, I'm going to talk you through this model because I haven't addressed it. So I'm going to quickly explain to you what we mean by this model, but feel free to ask any questions in the chat. We encourage you to do so. There's got to be things that have provoked you and your thinking within that consideration, and we look forward to your questions. We're going to switch back onto the camera broadcast. Okay, see you in a second.
Okay. Thanks, James.
Pleasure.
Good show as always, hopefully.
Handwriting.
Yeah.
Woo!
Some improvement necessary.
So yeah, that's an EBI.
Yeah. Oh God.
Yes. So we're looking for questions, right?
Yeah. So we've had a few actually. Lots of engagement with the show today, which is really good. Start with some on Twitter. Mr. Phallic PE. Hi, Christian. How long did it take you to come up with the equation for success? I think it was on tour. No, it must have been before the tour.
It was before. I mean, I think the thing I would say is that it wasn't a matter of coming up with it per se. I mean, I think the thing for me is I already knew it. I don't know. We just needed to write it down on a bit of paper and have it identifiable.
Yeah, it was just about quantifying the different parts. You know, it was just so. Yeah, it didn't take long to come up with it. It was like, what? I think the question originally was what makes a student successful in a school, college type of environment, and we just started talking about the different variables, and then it was like, well, that kind of sounds a bit like an equation. Let's just see if we write it down, see if it helps with trying to explain this thing in a bit more of a manageable way. Yeah. And that's what we came up with. There might be other bits as well, by the way, that go into that we haven't thought of yet. I think we've pretty much covered all of the they're kind of broad sections, so we kind of covered everything in there, but open to changing that if somebody else has something that's missing from that.
One of the things I like about that equation is that it partly represents what we do and what we're planning to do, but one of the things I find is the key strength of that equation is when something goes wrong, we can identify it in that model, and that is a very, very powerful thing, because it means that you don't spend time and resources outside of those things that you consider to be core. It also gives you great strength when you come to a decision that you are going to strategically completely ignore something that is not valuable. Yeah, and that gives you great strength. Now, there's some things that are easy to ignore, and there's other things that you kind of have to be seen to be doing, and there's other things which you genuinely should be doing. And we want that equation, for me at least, means that you can focus squarely and entirely on what you believe is most important that you should be doing, and then the other things come after that. So, as one of the best things I ever heard from a head teacher said to me once is the greatest skill of any leader is absolute neglect of that which doesn't matter. Yeah. And for me, that equation is a little bit about that. It allows me and us to focus in on the things that truly matter. And anything which is outside that, yes, we might be seen to be doing it. Yes, we might follow a protocol. But that's where our heart, that's where our resources, that's where our energy are all the time.
And quite rightly, the model gets challenged, as it should.
Correct,
as the current model should be challenged. That's what we're trying to do. Yeah. We're going to encourage that challenge. But this helps when that model is challenged to go, no, here's the point. Yeah. Here's the strength of it. Or, oh yeah, that challenge is highlighting something that's missing, so we need to add that in, or we need to change something. But it just gives us that kind of principle on a page that you can just refer back to.
We never want people to put numbers into that.
Yeah,
we don't think children can be reflected by numbers.
Yeah, you can't measure familiar involvement on a scale of 1 to 10. So don't.
But you can use it as your strength. You can use it as your foundations. You can have your roots so deep that whatever wind blows, you'll be strong. Yeah. And I think that's a nice way of looking at it. I think the other thing is, I won't go into defining all those parts, but I just define two. I think success, familiar involvement, resources, and behaviours. We could go into details about what we consider to be great resources, but the two I'd like to define: a mastery deficit. That is a structure and also a system that prevents gaps in knowledge and skills being built up by a learner. And secondly, a structure which is flexible enough so that if one is present a gap, the student can return to it. And that obviously that's an individual thing. And valuable time we consider to be two things only. Valuable time, this is from the student's perspective, valuable time with a teacher. We consider that to be personalized messaging, one-to-one time with the teacher. So that's one part of valuable time. And the other part of valuable time is genuine time and deep concentration by the learner. Nothing else we consider to be valuable time. I'm going to stress that again. The only things that we consider to be valuable time in that model are valuable time with the teacher, so the ratio of student to valuable time with the teacher, and secondly, the amount of time spent in concentration. Everything else we're going to completely ignore.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I think so. A couple more things. Wendy Reynolds. Hi, Wendy, another one of the pioneers. Definitely on the self-paced myself. Colleagues having a go as well. Student response is so positive, they don't want to go back. Wendy was saying to us a little while ago that she delivered some CPD, or delivered this as an idea to members of the school, and she had some girls from her class in there, and they were incredibly positive about it because of the impact it's having. So yeah, you'll probably hear more about Wendy at some point, because she's one of the pioneers. So we'll maybe try and get on for a live show.
We're hoping to do a show like this specifically about Wendy. Actually,
exactly.
about
the Wendy show.
The Wendy show, yeah.
Catherine Hackney went straight in with self-paced after tour. Too much change for students, are gradually implementing changes now. Positive effect so far. That's kind of an important point, isn't it?
Very important.
It's a big jump fundamentally for the teacher to change their mindset from what probably people have been doing for a number of years to all of a sudden just switch. It's a big jump. Students obviously need that time to adapt. Interestingly though, we're finding that students don't need as long to adapt as teachers.
No.
They generally are quite quick at picking up, and it's more natural for them, so they like it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a big jump, so it just needs to be managed, and it needs to be strategic. We have a kind of a mantra, which is that if this causes any damage, then it shouldn't be done. So it just has to be done in a strategic way.
The way I word that is zero collateral damage.
That's what I was trying to think of.
I know. I try to put it right. Zero collateral damage. So let me emphasize that point. We absolutely do not advocate that someone who is broadly working in a traditional one paced plus differentiation model today switches to self-paced learning tomorrow. It's for exactly that reason that we've put in flipped learning, blended learning, pedagogical learning. Please don't take the risk of just scrapping what you've done for 10 years of a career to do this, because it's a journey and it takes time, and you need support and resources around you to do it effectively. So even if you did do it, it could well crash and burn quite early. So you have to implement it strategically, maybe looking at it as a 2 or a 3 year cycle.
So I mean,
a very wise thing.
Flipped the model that you talked about earlier.
It's grabbable now.
Blended, that you could, flipped is grabbable now, but you can follow that path. Go flipped first, then blended, then eventually kind of more holistic self-paced model. The other way is to take a small chunk of the course, a 2 week unit, 2 week topic, or a number of those throughout the year, or a revision session, a workshop after school, before school, whatever, where maybe somewhere where there's a bit less pressure, and you have a bit more flexibility to, if it does all completely flop, then you can reflect on that without the fear of any sort of reprimand or whatever.
I think those 2 ways are both very wise.
And we have people doing both.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and what's exciting for us is that we've got people way down the path, and we've got people right on the first step, and that I actually find each equally enriching. What I hope we can provide in these conversations, not that we can make this right for everybody, because who knows what's right for everybody? Probably nothing is right for everybody. But what I want this conversation to be about is that it's part little kind of friendly slap on the cheek in a nice, kind way to kind of, or cold water that kind of wakes up. I'm going to think there's another possibility. There's something else which can be achieved. I like to think that this could be that. The other thing is to elevate the conversation. So many conversations that I've personally experienced in schools day to day tend to be a quite sort of superficial level at a systems level, or operational or systems level. What we're talking about here is elevating that thinking, even if it's just for half an hour, so that we get our chins up and have a look at what's around. And that's what we hope to do. I do realize sometimes that it's a little bit ideological, and it's sometimes like we did the CPD last time, people loved it because it was grabbable, quick CPD teaching ideas, and that's important too, but we need to talk about these things too.
Tom, is there any research completed on self-paced learning into the impact of teaching and learning? Yes, there is. First place to go to get that straight away, go and have a look at anything to do with the Khan Academy. They have plenty of research coming out which all works towards this model. It's all supportive of what we're suggesting, and also we're going to be putting something out. I think we've tweeted back to you, Tom, already. We'll put something out in the not so distant future. It's
very likely to coincide with the EverLearner.com release. We're going to be putting out some data at that time, so I'm just going to ask you just to be patient on that one. But what I would say at this point is you can be very reassured that data is positive. But we come back to the point we made before: zero collateral damage. Please ensure that you don't take risks in your classroom. That's absolutely essential as well. We need to make sure that things are not done in that risky model. Small risks are good, calculated risks are good, but not scrapping everything and restarting.
Risky is okay, but reckless is not, probably.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, and the pioneers as well also are going to just be having the conversation. So it may be more anecdotal evidence. Maybe there's going to be some action research coming out of some of those departments, those schools as well. But there will be plenty of conversation about experiences that people have had, which will count as some kind of evidence to suggest that it's working.
Yeah.
Initial planning is definitely key, but worth it. That's from Wendy. So just some words of wisdom from Wendy there. Initial planning is definitely the key, but it's worth it. Another one from Christian. Whereas the department have moved away from rows, now have tables set for small groups. Hashtags small steps towards the model. So part of it is about physically changing the environment. But obviously what we talked about today was a good place to start from a philosophical, a mindset point. And it's important to remember
the value system.
Yeah, don't just replicate the image that was on the video and hope it works, because there's a lot more that goes on in the background to facilitate that. The way it looks is just the...
It's just that's just the structure,
just
the superficial. The ideology and the learning model is without doubt the most critical part. Of course, you've got to resource that. You've got to develop behaviours and skills as the teacher, but that is way more important. I'm not meaning to put down the move away from rows. One of the things that I think both for Mike and I worries us the most is when all students are facing in the same direction all at the same time. That is a very, very concerning feature of a classroom. So we definitely support that. But I would definitely say the intrinsic changes, the internal changes, are probably the more significant ones to the external ones.
Yeah. There's just two more. Oh, there's a few more actually. Another one from Wendy. She's about to combine lower sixth and upper sixth. More to follow on that one. So if, at Heathfield PE is Wendy Reynolds, so maybe worth a follow. She's
really good.
active in this conversation.
I think her Twitter, I'll have to check, but I think her Twitter's some of the lines of director of sport. I might have got that wrong, but it's something like that. So
okay, well, she's Wendy Reynolds at Heathfield PE.
I've probably got it wrong. I wonder if I'm mixing her Wendy up. I apologise. Maybe
no.
How could I confuse you, Wendy?
So she's talking about combining lower sixth and upper sixth, and maybe that's not for now, but there's a whole strand of this conversation which is about why are year groups separated by a student's age?
Yeah.
Or why
I think it is. I think it's for now. I think the model we've just advocated, that the fourth step, the self-paced learning model, in that model there is next to zero reason. There might be 1 or 2 occasions where you do it by age group batching, but there's almost zero reason why you would have age-based batches with that. Now, there are external reasons, such as these guys are going towards a GCSE, these guys are going towards a BTEC, of course, but if we look at it from the learning perspective, there's absolutely no reason why that should be the case. And I urge people, if your A-level PE is under threat, if you've got low numbers on a qualification, you've got 4s and 5s at year 12, 4s and 5s at year 13, and your course is being threatened, is that potentially an answer so that you don't lose those qualification structures? I'm not suggesting we should compromise to that degree, but sometimes compromise is better than losing out completely. So that would be something to
in the
consider.
long run, it wouldn't be a compromise.
No, absolutely. Better. And we would actually like to work directly with people in that situation.
Yeah. What else have we got on here? Some more from Mr. Fallick. He's Mr. Fallick PE, by the way. That's Christian Fallick. A few things he's talking about there, things that he's trialing in his classroom, talking about behaviour a little bit there. So yeah, follow him and have that conversation.
Yeah,
and Christian,
good guy to follow.
Yeah, I'll make contact, Christian, and we'll talk about you joining the Pioneers group. Mr. Franklin, where are you getting targets from? School set, flight paths, or PE-specific predictors, etc.?
Yeah.
The important thing about the targets in this model is they're very different to the ones that you will be used to working with. They are not kind of gross level targets like Fisher, Trust, or Key Stage 2 data,
Alice or ALPS, or
any of those
whatever.
things. It's specific targets which students can literally tick off in their lesson. So these aren't big targets which last for a term that students never refer back to, or that they're too removed from the day-to-day. These are literally the day-to-day. So you could think of this as the equivalent of your learning objectives in your current model. It's the things that the students are going to learn and the learning outcomes which the students are going to do. It's that kind of equivalent. What we're doing is saying that they've got a sheet of maybe 12, 15, 18 targets, and they pace their own way through that as they wish. So it's not you giving the targets as in learning objectives on the board. They're pre-published specific to those students. So yeah, and we will provide those in time. We'll provide target sheets, and then you can add your own targets to that.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I mean, when we talk about target setting in the classroom, we are talking about, for example, a target could be master task X, Y, or Z. Master that task, and then of course whatever macro population level targets someone's been provided, because they're part of that system. You're ultimately feeding into passing that target anyway, and of course you're going to go through your reporting cycle with a whole massive amount more detailed data to be able to inform that decision. But the idea to us that you would, or that anyone would, apply population level data to an individual learner, let alone an individual learner on an individual task, is absolutely scandalous. And I cannot advocate strongly enough that should not and must not be happening in our schools. I make no equivocation about that point whatsoever. I think it is an appalling use of educational services. That was quite strong, wasn't it?
It was. Well said.
Got excited there.
Yes, what else have we got? Hopefully that answered your question, Miss Franklin. If not, then please tweet again and we'll clarify. Mr. Fallick again, finding confident students getting on, students lacking in confidence find it hard, low self-esteem, a blockage, question mark. Yeah, probably. And the other thing you have to remember is they've been in a model, probably if they're GCSE students or A-level, they've been in this model where the term spoon-fed is kind of overused, and a lot of the cases students aren't necessarily spoon-fed. There's really great teaching going on, but students are in this model where they're not expected to be as resilient, as independent as they are in this model. So when there's a shift, we're trying to undo maybe 10, 11, 12 years of what we could loosely consider bad practice. So, there's that adjustment that needs to be made there. Those students that you refer to lacking confidence or maybe have low self-esteem, it's kind of nice that you said that instead of low ability, which is really nice. So thanks for that. They've got bigger gains to make as well. So at some point, what the data coming out of the Khan Academy is showing is
amazing level of data.
They tend to hover around this low self-esteem, low confidence, not making so much progress as the ones who have shut off. But once they start to fill in some of those gaps, those mastery deficits, they begin to catch up and quite often even overtake those students. So you begin to see over enough time some really remarkable data, some remarkable improvements in students that you maybe wouldn't expect it from.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. That's certainly the case with all of the data coming out of the Khan Academy. That is my own experience of working in this model in the classroom as well, is that you do get that at the start of the model, the flyers fly off into the distance, almost like you would expect. And these kind of lower performing students, it takes them a little while to get used to that experience of mastery. But once they get there in the initial tasks, once they start believing, once they start building a set of behaviors which are generally bubbled around mastery, they fly. And as you said, Mike, very often overtake those that are considered to be the high achievers. I would strongly recommend, I can't speak for Christian in this sense, because obviously I don't know the classroom in the school, but in general, I would be far more worried at what I would call the fixed mindset high achiever profile than I would be at what we would call the low self-esteem student in this way. Because what we find with the fixed mindset high achiever is that they're completely reliant on a series of behaviors that have led to success or qualification-based success so far. And if they bump up against a level of challenge, a mastery requirement, which all of a sudden their behaviors don't get there, their image of themselves can fall apart quite quickly, because it's a very fragile veneer that they're wearing in reality as a learner. Very often they're not going through learning behaviors. They're kind of coasting through their experience. Not all, but sometimes. Yeah. And that is the student I'd encourage people to be most aware of, because it's those guys that not just work in this model, but it's those guys who at some point in their life they hit that ceiling and all of a sudden the world falls apart to them, because their image of themselves is broken and they've always thought I'm smart, and therefore
it's understandable for those guys, right? Because it in inverted commas has been working for them so far. So when the teacher says no, I'm not actually going to just tell you the answer, or I'm not going to provide you with the stuff you need when you need it, you've got to go and find the worksheet yourself, or you've got to go and do the research yourself. You've got to take the teaching yourself. It's like, well, why? I'm doing fine in the current model, so why does this need to change? But
well, you'll definitely
there's
and that's a
benefits to those students for getting through that and running with it. So
I completely agree, and that's one of the reasons why introducing the idea to the students and even getting the parents on board before you introduce something like self-paced learning is a good idea. so that people understand not only what you're going to do, but why you're going to do it, and what the experience is going to be like, and people can voice their concerns. When I first introduced this model, I made a mistake about that. I didn't do that with the parents. And I remember one student in particular, Sophie. Some of you will know this person was because she represented Team GB at the Olympics in trampolining. And she really didn't want to go through this model. And she just wanted to be told what to learn, and just wanted to give and all the key points. Now I can learn them. Now I can pass my exam, etc., etc. And it took a lot of cajoling and a lot of convincing and a lot of parental concern before we really made it work in this model. But she got full UMS marks and got an A star, one of the highest performing students in the country,
and went to the Olympics.
So
Sophie.
It didn't go too badly for us. So yeah, I think it was all right.
Cool. Another one from Wendy. Often low esteem pupils panic as they feel the blanket has been pulled in her experience. So it's just another reason to do this cautiously and make sure that everyone's informed what's going on.
But we have to believe in them, Mike.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Wendy doesn't in this case, but if we are labeling a low confidence, low esteem student, all that needs to change about that student is their esteem, and then they need to experience some success and some behaviors which lead to mastery. When they get that, I guarantee you that the limitations will be far, far fewer than we could have possibly imagined, and let them surprise you. Some students will truly, truly surprise you.
Definitely. Right, on YouTube then, what have we got? Layout of a classroom is an issue if you don't have your own PE room. We get this one a lot. It's probably the biggest one that people initially go to. In time, I think there's going to be more and more coming out from the pioneers, which just refute that claim. Ultimately, and there's already some of that. If you, in the Facebook group we have for the pioneers, there's lots of actually it's just not really a big issue. There's ways around, and you've got to realize if you have a PE classroom and you can have all this set up all the time and nobody else is coming into your space, it's probably going to be easier. But there's ways around it. So I think,
but I don't like that model either, Mike, because it's ultimately an underused resource. Then, unless you've literally got PE classrooms in there, I mean, schools shouldn't have classrooms like that. No. Schools should have classrooms that are busy and engaging young people and develop. So we can't only have the best of the world. There are situations. So three things I'd say. If I'm sorry for interrupting, by the way, but if I may, the two things up front, and then a third thing which might feel a bit strong. But first of all, the first time I did this was with a non-dedicated classroom, and I used a trolley mechanism. It was a bloody nightmare. I'm not endorsing it. I'm not recommending it because it nearly killed me. But it can be done if you're committed to it enough. You can push your way through. I remember trailing that thing across the playground, getting laughed at. I remember trying to get up flights of stairs. It was not fun. Secondly, we are pretty confident we're going to be putting a scheme out later this academic year where we're actually going to be providing funding for a number of schools and a number of classrooms to resource their classroom in the ways that we're describing here. So whether that be like a trolley-based system or devices for the room, or whether it be new tables or whatever, we're going to be putting out the opportunity for people to bid for some investment to do that. And the third one is that I'm only speaking about this as James, and thinking about individuals who have the right to develop as they want to develop in their career. Keep knocking on that door and ask for the dedicated classroom. If it never becomes available and you are absolutely certain that you want to attempt this model, then there's more schools. Now, no one's suggesting leaving kids behind at that school is the right thing to do, but if that's what you want to do in your career, you have the right to that growth and that opportunity if that's what's important to you. And if it is, look around and see what's about. For sure.
Yeah. Moving on, Dan Hutchinson. I think this is in reply to another comment which I must have missed, but he says 100% self-paced. Tom agree it's a barrier that can be adapted to meet what you have. Dan is also one of our pioneers, so worth following him. I don't know, Dan, if you want to post your Twitter handle or something in the comments there, so people can follow you. But you'll be hearing more about Dan because he's one of our pioneers. So I'm not sure what that comment necessarily relates to, but just so you're aware of Dan. Tom, just concerned how much time wasted moving tables and chairs around. It's a point to consider. Lots of the comments that we've heard are about having some kind of rota set up so different students come in 2 minutes early to do it. I did exactly that and become very quick at moving the tables and chairs around. Students know where things need to be eventually, so they can become quite quick at it. The other point to make is that thought process is one of the current model where you only have X amount of time. You only have 55 minutes. and any time wasted is time wasted. But we have to make those lines more flexible, because they don't just have 55 minutes now. They have tutorials 24/7. They have quizzes 24/7. They will have access to their teacher eventually much more frequently than they currently have. The resources are all available all the time. So they don't necessarily waste learning time, because they have so much more of that time, in theory at least.
I mean, two things I'd say to Tom's point. Tom and I know each other. He knows how I feel about him. I once gave him a cuddle at a university campus once, which can set some rumours going. But the thing I'd say to Tom is that, first of all, reflect on what I said before, which is the first change to make is intrinsic. It's internal. It's in the mind. It's in the value system. That's the change to focus on first, and then you can implement a strategy gradually. Secondly, and I say this as lovingly and as caringly and as passionately as compassionately, and passionately and compassionately as I can. But if the only thing stopping us doing the model is tables and chairs, find a way. I hope you're comfortable with me saying that. I mean it in the most positive way possible. I think Tom already knows that guy's a legend in my eyes. He's someone, when I first started using Twitter, for example, he was like a god to me. Like, this guy, he had a good following, he had great resources out there still, did the Teach Meet final, what a legend. So Tom, I hope you don't mind me speaking directly like that. It's meant to be supportive. I hope it comes across that way. But I would say if that's the barrier, find a way round the barrier.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Simon, we're a fan of Simon as well. Simon Bradbury, yeah. P. Brado, I think, on
P dash Brad. No, P. Brado.
Simon posted it in the comments.
They know him. He's all over it.
I was hoping to try this model GCSE PE class after half term, but being re-roomed for exams the first 3 weeks back, obviously you're going to have these stumbling blocks to get in the way. Then he's posted straight away after, is there a particular topic you would advise starting this concept with for GCSE PE?
Sorry, you go.
No, well, we've put out already.
I think I left myself on the screen the whole time there. Sorry, Mike.
I'm sure people appreciate that.
It was me just staring around. Yeah.
We've just put out the biomechanics pack. So if anybody is in that point where they're teaching biomechanics, then there is all of the classroom resources ready to go for that unit.
For each of the zones. So there's activity sheets in there, note sheets, worksheets.
So
past paper questions, mark schemes,
there's
model answers.
80 pages plus the past paper questions, which are available as well.
Yeah.
So that's obviously a good place to start, because it's already resourced. So lots of comments that come up are about the heaviness of the front loading of the planning.
Yeah.
We want to help with that as much as we can. Our next plan is to do a complete GCSE pack at some point.
We shouldn't be too long on that.
Yeah, that's coming out. Once we
2018,
once we finished it, but it's not going to be a million years away. So that's going to help a lot. I don't think, apart from that, Simon, there's necessarily an answer apart from just a topic that you feel comfortable with, because one of the things that happens is when you're the teacher and you're sat at that small group teaching table, the questions you get asked are not just the questions that you happened to revise yourself last night when you were making the PowerPoint. It's any question in that range of topics which you've allowed the students to self-pace and self-direct in. So you have to become much more comfortable with the content. Heather was saying,
or comfortable about not knowing. That's also important, and going to research it. That will become much more normalised in this environment. Yeah,
we had Amy Anderson, one of the pioneers, the other day,
Thomas
saying,
Clarkson.
that she's trying this now, and she is one of the students in the class, learning alongside the students, because I think she said it was a new spec, something she's not necessarily comfortable with. So she is learning alongside the students. So that's going to be fascinating to see how that pans out.
What an honest person.
Yeah, and how it's going to be interesting to see how she balances that, being the teacher but also being the student, or maybe she just abandons being the teacher and just is a role model for how to learn. maybe that's a better way of being a teacher.
It's just stunning. I mean, I think I've done some brave things in my career, but I'm not brave enough to do. That's really unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, I'm not brave enough to do that.
Yeah. Amy, if you're listening, then we need to get you on to talk about that.
It's stunning. I'm going to actually disagree with you about one thing, Mike. I mean, just on Simon's question about which topic to do, I would personally choose the hardest topic you can find. That would be my model, and I would try, and I would go, whether it's energy systems or biomechanics at A level, or it's engagement patterns on the social cultural stuff, the GCSE, whatever you think is the hardest thing. I would go for the really challenging material and allow people to take their time and flexibility to develop a really intuitive knowledge and skill base in that thing. That would be my way. I can't say that's right for Simon because I don't know, but that would be the way I would look at it. But as you said before, picking maybe a 4-lesson or a 6-lesson block and testing it is also low risk, and I
Yeah.
think that would be very, very
Just-
positive.
It just makes it manageable and it makes it low risk. So
Yep.
yeah, we've covered that. Sally, just tried it with my Sally Jones. I've just tried it with my year 11, delivering skill classification, goal setting, IP model guidance for a first attempt. Went really well. Well done, Sally. Thanks for sharing. Again, get in touch, Sally. Drop us an email, mike@mypeexam.org, and happy to put you in touch with some of the other people who have tried it as part of the Pioneers group. We'd love to have you as part of that. Mickey, couple from Mickey.
Don't Mickey Riddle.
Yeah, Mickey Riddle in Birmingham.
JCC.
JCC.
Well, legend.
Yeah, real nice place. I love that place.
Nice place, nice bloke.
Yeah. The key for me is the resources, online questions, worksheets, time to plan and create these is vital. We covered that. We want to help as much as we can. But it's interestingly, the comments we're getting back from people like Heather, who was on the other day, is that it does take time, but all you're doing is shifting the time from
Correct.
evenings during the term or during the week to up front.
Yeah.
So she spent a lot of time over her summer doing it, bless her.
And a real reason to a genuine reason to collaborate, whether
Yeah.
it's across department or it's into school potentially.
Yeah. And what those people are finding now is that, yes, it's a big investment up front for time, but during the course of the unit or the topic or the week, there is
Live your
no planning to do. So
You could be a
you get
human
it back.
being.
You imagine that as a teacher. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I just want to read this one from Dan. I've certainly found that one thing from my experience that students are gaining different outcomes from self-paced lessons such as life skills that employers, tertiary education are calling for.
Yeah.
Well said, Dan. Don't
Yeah.
need to add anything to that. And it makes sense if you think about it just logically. That
But do you know why that is? Do you
Go
know, in my opinion, the reason that is because we're actually applying a learning model which is actually the way in which human beings learn.
Yeah.
We're not taking an assumed industrial 19th century model and planting on top of the behaviors of modern children. What we're doing is we're taking a learning model which is broadly how humans learn and allowing children to flourish in a very well resourced and supportive environment. So that should happen.
Yeah, definitely. Well said. I was half listening and half checking Twitter. I'm sure it was good, whatever you said.
I'm just going on these monologue Jim that you can call me tonight.
Last three things then on Twitter. Christian, thanks for answering and discussing the points. You're more than welcome.
Absolutely welcome.
Thanks for the work
Christian's
you
a
do as well.
real great guy.
Yeah,
Real
always
great guy.
putting things on Twitter and
Lovely guy.
happy to talk. So
And nice to it was Christian, wasn't it, that we met down in Worthing, wasn't it, on that first morning when we were terrified on tour? Remember
yeah,
that?
they were very nice at Worthing. Though.
Yeah, we had an amazing morning on the Monday morning at Worthing, and then we got all cocky because we thought we nailed it, and then we went to Harlow in the afternoon, and it really went badly.
Yep. Yeah, kept us in check.
Yeah.
Wendy, this might be a nice one to finish on. Dan Hutchinson, hello all, please get in contact if you'd like to chat about self-paced learning and the TEL classroom.
Well said, Dan.
What a pioneer. And Wendy, once they know you are not going to let them fail, they soar. Well said, Wendy. Let's sign off there. Drop the mic if I could.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and it's funny really because within the model you kind of do manage them potentially failing at points, because if a student comes to you and says something like, tell me what I need to know, your answer is going to be no. You're going to say no, but here are the resources you need to succeed, and I'm here to support you. But it's so supportive. The resource base is so rich, the time is so flexible, the access to the teacher is so robust that success is extremely likely. You can't guarantee anything.
I think the other important thing, not the most important, but one of the other things to say is that doing this model is a very enjoyable experience as a teacher.
Couldn't agree more.
Really, it's just really relaxed. The atmosphere in the classroom's generally nice. It's a really nice place to spend your time. And then when you couple that with the fact that you've done some of your marking in the class alongside the student, so you know they've had a better experience of the feedback, and you haven't got to do that in the evening. You know that your planning is already done because you did it over half term or in the summer holiday beforehand, and eventually all of the planning will be done. So in theory, there's no planning to do. All you do as the teacher is check on the dashboard, see how the students are getting on, decide on who you're going to go and speak to, and go and just have nice conversations with kids in the class about their learning.
Yeah, how many times did we hear from a pioneer the other day that they felt lazy?
Yeah. Felt redundant in the classroom.
I felt redundant at times, and I mean, maybe a great way to put this is a great way to finish this. Actually, is to say that the objective of a teacher should be to be redundant. That is the true objective of any true educator, is to be completely redundant in the classroom, because everything you are and everything you have as a capacity has been shared and provided to those learners, and that ultimately should be the ambition of a true educator, and that should be on the level of qualification, skill, knowledge, content, all that kind of stuff, but also as a human being, as a person. And this model, if done in the level we've talked, the 100 grand a year level we talked about before, if done at the mastery, that the master teacher level, then that can absolutely be achieved. Anyway, I think we should.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thanks everyone for participating. It makes a really nice conversation when lots of people comment on YouTube
really
and Twitter. So it's, we always have a great time. Hope it's useful to you guys as well.
I have got an appeal. We've built this TV studio. Let me grab my camera's going to go all funny here. So this is going to go all wonky a little bit. But this is our Mike's over there. Look, there he is. I'm here. Look, here's the mixing deck that we use. For example, you get the idea of what we're doing. We've kind of built this. I'll keep this nearby. We've built this little. Can you put that back for me, Mike? I've had a nightmare. We've built this little TV studio in here, and what we'd like to say to people is that either whether you come to be in here, be in the space with us, in the office with us, if you're near enough, or whether you join us on an online chat, we would like to have you in these types of broadcasts. Never mind because with this level or that level, this teacher or that teacher, this Twitter or that Twitter, whatever. We just like to talk to you, learn from you, listen to you, ask you questions, and broadcast that hopefully learning-based conversation out to people so that they can also benefit from it. So wherever your ideas are, whether it's a sharing space, whether it's you've just found one brilliant questioning technique, if you found a magnificent way to organize your store cupboard, come on here and talk to us about it, and we'll share it with as many people as we humanly can. So get in touch with us about that, because we will snap your hand off at that, because we want to have those conversations. Right, I'm going to shut up.
Right,
we're done.
Thanks all.
Cheers
Good night.
all. Have a great evening. Look after yourselves, and thanks for spending so long with us. Cheers.
Bye.